I will continue to watch to see if our remaining 3 members are able to join us.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
The stream is live. You're ready to begin.
Good morning and welcome to the Reading, Diagnostic, and Intervention Grant Steering Committee meeting. Today is December 17th and this meeting is starting here at 10 a.m. And we are so glad that you are joining us today virtually. This is the second convening of the newly appointed Reading and Diagnostic Grant Steering Committee, and we welcome all of you that are viewing the meeting remotely and that are here with us today. I'm Whitney Hamilton, the Read to Achieve Grant Director for the Kentucky Department of Education. And with me today are representatives from the Office of Teaching and Learning, Commissioner Glass, who will provide some opening comments, and Vice Chair Sam Sams, who will be chairing the meeting today in the absence of Dreama Gentry. Before we begin, I have a few announcements on conducting virtual meetings that I want to remind us of. So this meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. Accordingly, members of the Grant Steering Committee must ensure their video is streaming and they can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. Members, please mute your microphone when not talking. However, all discussions must be broadcast to the public. Therefore, be sure that your microphone is not on mute when you are speaking. Every time you speak during the meeting, please unmute your mic, state your name, and take a short pause. This will give the software time to recognize you. For any items that require a vote, which is only our minutes, which we are going to move past for this meeting today, as our main reason for meeting today is to review amendments to the fiscal year 22 RFA, request for application for the Read to Achieve grant. And we have we have members here to look over that today. So we will do that. However, we will not be voting on anything at this time as we do not have quorum. But quorum is not needed for the purposes of the main reason for this meeting. Lastly, I do want to remind you to silence or turn off other electronic devices that may cause disruption to your sound feed. So that we can just have a smooth meeting as much as possible, please. Now we will, when we do the roll call, of course, unmute and let us know you're here by stating your name, but we'll go over those directions when the time is here, but there will not be any voting. All right, so we will begin with Dr. Glass's opening remarks.
Thanks so much, and good morning and welcome everyone. We certainly appreciate your attendance, and I know that this is an incredibly busy time for you. Just many of you this is the last day before the holiday break, so there's a lot going on, and a lot of your children are full of sugar today, so I know that creates extra dynamic in your world. We value your feedback, and this committee. When the Read to Achieve grant RFA was published, KDE received questions and concerns about that RFA. So we heard those. And some of those questions were from the potential applicants through the built-in RFA question and answer process that we have. Other concerns were sent to us informally through the KBE or through their public comment process. We heard that feedback, and we are committed to this grant being successful and assisting struggling readers throughout the state. And so because we've heard that feedback, we're taking the opportunity to amend this RFA and to extend the application deadline. So that's what we want to talk about with you today, is how we plan to amend the RFA and then the extension of that deadline. The amendments to the RFA, we hope, will provide clarity, and they will address some of the concerns while also continuing to comply with statutory requirements regarding RTA grants, regulatory requirements from the State Board of Education, because this is an open procurement process, the state procurement requirements for RFAs, as we have done to date. So I think in some, what you're going to hear is greater flexibility and more time for districts to respond. There are some elements that we've identified in statute and in regulation that we don't think were well attended to in the past, and so we're not going to be able to relax on those because we are now aware of those. It's, I would say, illegal and unethical for us to just ignore them at this point. So there are some things that we're not going to be able to make adjustments on, but we do think that we can provide greater flexibility and more time. So the purpose of the meeting today is to walk you through the amendments and to allow for greater feedback from you. And then based on the required RFA process timeline, we hope to get, or must get, that amended RFA posted as soon as possible so that districts can continue the application process, because we want to make sure that the grant is in place and funding is distributed to grantees in July of 2022. We all know that there's a huge need for coherent, high-quality early literacy instruction, and there's a need for intervention. All these things are great needs. And research tells us about the significance of early literacy outcomes for students. We know that that's so important. So we thank you for being here today. And at this time, I'll turn things back over to the committee so you can continue working through the meeting agenda. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. All right, so we will move on to roll call, and Sams will be taking care of that.
So at this time, we will have a roll call to document the attendance of those present at today's meeting. Names will be announced according to how they are listed in KRS 158.794. And I will begin with the 3 non-voting members who serve on the committee by virtue of their position. When I call your name, I will also include the role in which you have been assigned as provided in statute. And when your name and role have been called, please state your name for the record and announce present. And if I remember correctly, the cameras need to be on, and make sure you unmute yourself when you say present. So our first non-voting members, we have President of the Council on Post-Secondary Education, Aaron Thompson, or the President's designee. All right, Executive Director of the Collaborative Center for Literacy Development, George Hruby, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing names correctly. All right, now I will now call the names of the remaining members. As an appointee of the governor, you serve as a voting member of this committee. Bobby Barrier, primary program teacher.
Bobby Barrier, present.
Dawn Sexton, primary program teacher.
Dawn Sexton, present.
Nancy Huon, post-secondary faculty. Susan Cantrell, post-secondary faculty.
Susan Cantrell, present.
And then we have stated here that Penny Howe, post-secondary faculty, was not able to attend today. Sam Sams, elementary school principal, I'm present. Jessica Sparrow, library media specialist.
Jessica Sparrow, present.
Rima Gentry, state at-large member, was not able to be with us today. Neil Chethick, state at-large member. Lisa King, state at-large member.
Lisa King, present.
And Tammy Sherry, post-secondary faculty.
Tammy Sherry, present.
Thank you. There are 7 voting members present. Therefore, we still do not have quorum, I believe. Is that correct? And we now may proceed into the next item on, which is to approve the agenda.
May I just ask, Whitney, do you mind just double checking the waiting room for me? to make sure we don't have anyone there who maybe need to log out and come back in to prompt us to admit them into the meeting.
I'm not seeing anyone in the waiting.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
I just want to double check because I know for Ms. Sexton, that was part of what she had experienced, but I have reached out to the other participants. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. Thank you for asking. All right, we will move on to approving the agenda and meeting minutes from September 30th. The agenda for the Reading and Diagnostic Grant Steering. Oh, there's Neil. So we will pause.
Now we're going to go back to roll call, and if you could make sure your camera's on and just say present, Neil Chethick, State at-Large member.
Having trouble getting my camera on. Okay. No.
It's okay, Mr. Tethy. We can hear you. We just can't see you at this time, as I know you're experiencing.
Yeah, I'm unable. What? Not
But
sure.
are you able to see and hear us effectively?
I can see and hear you, and I can see the agenda, but I cannot turn my camera on for some reason. Just clicking on. There's no camera. I can try going out and coming back if that is required.
Let's do that because we are right at quorum, and so in order for us to meet the public meeting laws, we do need to be able to see you when you vote. So if we can ask you to go back out and then come back in, hopefully that will correct itself.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, Whitney, if he is unable to get his camera on, then we'll just have to skip the minutes. And then again, we just won't vote on that, and we'll go on and make sure that we are honoring everyone's time and getting into the actual review.
Absolutely. Shall we still approve the agenda? Just not the minutes, the past minutes.
Well, we really shouldn't have any, that's the thing, we shouldn't have any formal vote if we do not have quorum. And part of that would be our ability to be able to see them voting. So it is problematic.
Yeah. So if he is unable to get his camera, I will just move on to the overview of the amendments to just go over. And I would think we could give him just another moment or two, and then I'll just continue on. And I would assume that at the end we could go back and approve the minutes and do an official vote if that would be okay, if he does join back.
Yes, that should work. I appreciate everyone's flexibility.
Yes, thank you. Oh, there he comes. Let's see. Wonderful. We can see you now. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great. All right, Sam.
All right, Neil Chethick, State at-Large Member.
Neil Chethick here.
Thank you so much. We now have 8 voting members present.
Excellent. So we do have quorum, and we will move on to approving the agenda and the meeting minutes from September 30th. All right. The agenda of the Reading Diagnostic and Intervention Grant Steering Committee meeting was provided in a press release issued on Thursday, December 9th. You will see that the agenda has also been displayed for you on the screen. I will give you a moment to review before I proceed with the roll call. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Neil.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Mickey, were you able to tell who? I think 2 people spoke up at the same time.
No, I do need that again. I'm sorry.
I heard Bobby Barrier.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Bobby. Is there any further discussion before proceeding to a roll call for voting members? As before, at that time, the member should state his or her name, pause, and then state, I vote yes or I vote no. Bobby Barrier.
Bobby Barrier, I vote yes.
Dawn Sexton.
I vote
Nancy,
yes.
thank you. Nancy Hoolan. Here. Susan Cantrell.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Sam Sams.
I vote yes.
Jessica Sparrow.
Jessica Sparrow, I vote yes.
Neil Chethick.
Neil Chethick, I vote yes.
Lisa King.
Lisa King, I vote yes.
Tammy Sherry.
Tammy Sherry, I vote yes.
Thank you. Okay, the committee has voted and the agenda for today's meeting has been approved. We will now move on to approve the minutes from the September 30th meeting. Those were posted on the website and a copy was sent to committee members. I will give you a moment to review before I proceed with the roll call. Is there a motion to?
I'm sorry, this is Dawn Sexton. A thing just popped up that said there are people waiting in the lobby on my screen. So I don't know if there's something mixed up again or what.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. I did not see that.
Whitney, there's no one in the lobby.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't see anyone, but I was trying to double check. Thank you so much. All right. So, is there a motion to approve the minutes from September 30th?
This is Sam Sams. I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Sam. Is there a second?
This is Tammy Sherry, I second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, as before, we will take the roll call and the member should state his or her name and then either say I vote yes or I vote no. Bobby Barrier.
Bobby Barrier, I vote yes.
Dawn Sexton.
Dawn Sexton, I vote yes.
Thank you. Okay, Susan Cantrell.
Susan Cantrell. I was absent from the meeting. Normally, I would abstain in that case.
Penny Howe. Oh, sorry, she's not here. Sam Sams.
Sam Sams. I vote yes.
Jessica Sparrow.
Jessica Sparrow, I vote yes.
Dreama Gentry. Here. Neil Chethik. Neil Chethik.
Neil Chethik, I vote yes.
Thank you. Lisa King.
Lisa King, I vote yes.
And Tammy Sherry.
Tammy Sherry, I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. We have seven yeses. And so if Sarah or Mickey might advise, I mean, we will move on, but is that enough for an approval?
So with the one vote that has been abstained, we'll have to talk with legal to see if those are formally approved.
Okay, thank you. So we will just we'll follow up on that. Thank you, everyone. All right, so now we will move on to the overview of the amended fiscal year 22 request for application for the Read to Achieve grant. So I'm going to share that on the screen, and we're just going to go through it together. So the document has the same format as it always has. You'll notice here on the very first screen, this, just very straightforward deadline and deadlines for the emails for any questions that need to come in. Those dates have been updated, but everything appears, looks the same as far as formatting on this first page. Once you get to page 2 of the amended version, you will see revisions, page 10, sentence removed. That is actually a revision that was made pre-amendment, pre this amended version. So that will stay there. And that is the version that's actually online right now for everyone to see. So if anyone who's been looking at the RFA is already aware of this page 10 sentence being removed, which was just an error. But then this is new text, this red print. Yes, ma'am.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can you make that a little bit bigger at the bottom, just so they can see? I know that many have a copy, but just so they can see that a little bit more.
Sure,
there we go.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
Whoa, maybe that's a little too big. Hold on. Thank you for saying that, Mickey. How about that? Is that big enough, or should I go a little larger?
I think that's perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Mickey. Yes, so this is the first time that you will see a new look on the page, and that is, this is in red to draw your attention to the amendments. And so we have a paragraph here that just lets viewers know that the red is pointing to amendments and an explanation for why there are amendments, which Dr. Glass spoke to already earlier. I will say that the amendments are primarily, the main changes are around allocations to funding. So percentages have been removed, and we'll look at that more closely when we get to that section. All right, so we have a bulleted list here of amendments. And this is how they look. I'm not going to read through each one of these at this time. I am going to take you through them though. So you'll see this on the rest of page 2 as well as page 3. And it just lets you know which section and what page number the amendment can be found on for each of these bulleted points. If everybody could make sure they're on mute, unless we have a question pop up, of course, you may unmute. We will have an opportunity for feedback, though, once I go through the amendments.
And Whitney, the only other thing I'd like to add is that the decision to have all of the amendments posted at the beginning of the RFA in red, that was under the advisement of the Office of Finance and Operations. So they have a particular protocol and procedure for what happens when you are able to amend an RFA. And so that was their advice. And so then local schools and districts and educators can see at the beginning all of the changes that have been made. And then Whitney's going to actually take you through those changes at this time.
Yes, so we're just following the typical format that is used when amendments need to be made. Thank you for that clarification, Nikki. All right, so looking here on the timeline page, you will see that the deadline for applications to be submitted has been moved to Friday, January 21st, still by 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You will see here that the amended version, we anticipate it being released mid to late December. That's where we are here, right now, into mid to late December. But of course, we are having this meeting before that will happen. Monday, January 3rd, we will have another live technical assistance webinar. We felt that it was important and needed to have one of these again with the amendments. We know there will be questions, so we want to offer all stakeholders an opportunity to join us live to have their questions answered. So that will happen on January 3rd, and then of course a recording of that will be posted. After it concludes. The deadline to submit questions, we will accept questions until the next day. That will be January 4th. Those must be received by 4 p.m. And then we will quickly get those questions all into the FAQ document, and we'll release that on or around January 7th. Anyone who is wishing to request an off-list pre-approved professional learning provider for one of the 4 categories of professional learning, they will need to submit that request by January 12th at 4 p.m. So that, of course, has been extended as well. Again, the application deadline shows up here in order. That will be January 21st, as already mentioned. We have put in the date here. This was not in the previous version, but the independent evaluators will be reviewing applications February 21st through 25th, so during that week. And then, as before, the on or around April, this has been moved back just a little bit, on or around April 22nd, districts will receive preliminary notice of award. And then, as always, that's why we're on such a tight timeline, the funding needs to be available to those local schools, the districts, by July 1st of 2022.
And Whitney, we do have a question.
Okay, thank you for letting me know that.
I'm sorry, I just had a question about, I know we're on a tight timeline, but the deadline for the 21st, especially with the recent events with the tornadoes hitting Western Kentucky, could that be extended even farther than the 21st of January?
So we've had some discussion, and Mickey, if you prefer to be the one to answer this, I was just going to share from our conversation on that. But if you prefer to share, that's fine.
I can do that, Whitney. So we did reach out to budgets regarding that and that very question. And we know that for some of the other grants, they have been able to offer an extension. what we're waiting to see, the issue is for us is because we anticipate so many applicants based on previous renditions of the grant. And because of that, there is so much work that has to happen between the application deadline and when the reviewers are selected and they have time to actually meet together. That really is the last possible time. However, if we do get requests from those specific schools that need extended time, then we would, of course, determine what we can do to make sure that they can apply and are still available for applying and potentially receiving the grant. So that the timeline is about as far out as it can possibly be now, because of course, as you know, we are behind in the cycle, but we do want to be responsive and make sure that everyone is able to apply who would like that.
Thank you for the question.
And Whitney, the only other thing I wanted to add, if you can scroll back up to the timeline, the February 21st through 25th, so that's determined as the time allowable for the applications to be reviewed, for the independent evaluators to come in. And you all know part of your requirements as a committee will be to vote and approve on the awarded grantees. And so we would need to ask you to come in between, soon after that February, so perhaps the first part of March. So if you're wanting to put that as a note in your calendar, we would likely need to meet with you in early March or within the month of March in order to be able to get the approval so that we can move forward with notifying the awardees within April.
Okay. The next change that happens is with the phrase "science of reading." That phrase has been removed, and this happens the first time here under funding. So, for instance, here, professional learning in building knowledge in the science of reading. So, rather than saying that as it did before, professional learning and understanding the cognitive processes and skills involved in learning how to read. So that has been that phrase has been replaced throughout the document. So I'm not going to stop and point out that every single time, but just be aware that change has been made throughout. Also here under funding, we have made a clarification around the match will be at 100% of grant funds. We had some questions around that of principals asking if it is law that there has to be that match. And we had folks asking, well, can it be a 20% match? Does it have to be the full 62,000? So we've provided that clarification in here. So a 100% of grant funds for a total of 62,000 as the match. So when you put the grant funds with the matching funds, we are looking at that total combined of 124,000. The next place that you will see an amendment is in the implementation requirements in section C for professional learning. All right. And as I already mentioned, the percentages have been removed. So previously this said that 50% of grant funds would be used toward professional learning. And so that is no longer here. So you see yearly awardees must participate in high quality professional learning. So there are still all of the same professional learning requirements, but the funding has not been limit or restricted to 50,000 or 50% of funds of the grant funds going toward that. And that has been, let's see, okay, right here. We have a clarification here. Within the first year, at least 50% of K-3 reading instructional staff, including classroom teachers, reading interventionists, special education teachers, library and media specialists, and other staff who assist struggling primary readers, must begin professional learning in building knowledge in understanding the cognitive processes and skills involved in learning how to read, with all said reading instructional staff having started or completed the training by the end of year 2. So the change here is that previously it said within the first year, the majority of K-3 reading instructional staff and then the rest. We just wanted to be clear on a couple of things here. We had a lot of questions or people saying that the grant required all staff, and we just want to be clear that it is not all staff. It is all K-3 staff, but it's also not all K-3 staff. Majority did not mean most or like all of the K-3 reading instructional staff would need to start this training on the first year, the specific training in that category 1, understanding the cognitive processes and skills involved in learning how to read. It did not mean all. We want it to be achievable. So at least 50%. So if you have at least 50% of staff, K-3 staff, not all staff, but all K-3 staff that do support reading instruction, half of them need to be involved in that particular category of training in the first year. And then the remainder would start that in the second year. So by the end of year 2, all K-3 reading instructional staff would have at least started that training, and some would be finished with it by the end of year 2. And do note that the school administrator or coaches that are assigned to that school can be counted in that toward that 50% of at least 50% receiving that training starting in the first year. So that's been clarified down here as well, requirement of at least 50% of all K-3 reading instructional staff beginning that training in year 1.
And Whitney,
we have a question.
Thank you. And I do need you all to do that because I can't see both places. So thank you so much.
I just need a little clarification, and this might be a question that can be saved for later, but
Sure.
So with the professional development providers that are listed, if you are working within a school district that has already had some of their staff go through one of the programs that are listed, are they still required to choose a different program to go through over the course of the 2 years if they've already received one, so that you have everyone going through it?
Yes, so we can't have funding that's already been spent count toward this grant cycle. So that's why there's so many choices and options for the training.
But I will say, since the funding is now flexible, so since there is the ability for schools and districts to utilize the funding in different mechanisms, if there could be evidence of the completion of that training, then I think that there is the potential there for that to be submitted for approval. And there are other free options that they could participate in as a part of the current grant cycle. But I would want, if I were that school leader, I would want to provide evidence of the training within that category that has been completed previously as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we would potentially need to look at how recently as well, and if there have been updates to that particular training since they participated in it, since they engaged in it. Okay. Moving on, and we're still in the implementation requirements, but moving down to the other section H, other requirements and responsibilities. In this third bullet, we've clarified again, 100% matching funds may come from, and it always said appropriate federal, state, and or local sources. We did receive a lot of questions on that. It already says that here. It's always said that, but we wanted to clarify that it is 100% matching funds, as already noted on earlier in the document. Moving on to the professional learning providers table. This table now matches the one that was released at the
technical assistance
thank
meeting.
you, the technical assistance meeting. Yes, this is now the same one that was released there, but it does have, so it has the video links as well as the cost and the time commitment. We do have some changes, though, that I want to point out that they're here, and they're noted in red at the beginning of the document, but they are down at the Keys to Literacy section. They just reported they had errors in what they submitted, so they needed to update that information. So right here, this has just been reorganized so that it's clear that which money amounts go with Keys to Beginning Reading course and which ones go with the Keys to Early Writing course. That was just a little bit difficult to discern between the two before, and there was actually some cost errors as well in the writing course, as well as the number of hours. For instance, it used to say 15 hours, and now it's been changed to 12 hours. So that is a change. The facilitated online course, that used to read, in one of these places, it used to read 16,200 was replaced with 6,000. And my eyes are looking for it here. Yeah. Per cohort for up to, I'm looking here to make sure it's accurate.
We also have another question.
Okay, go ahead with the question.
Whitney, my question is really about questions. Do you prefer that we just wait till we get through all of this and ask the questions, or do you prefer that we stop as you're going through?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I personally think sometimes right when it's happening is the best time to ask it. I don't feel like it's slowing us down to the point that we're not, I think we're doing well on time. So I personally am fine with those happening,
Okay.
Right on time. If we see a need that we need to hold off till the, scheduled feedback time, then I'll let you know.
Okay. Well, then I'll pose my question, and it may be one you want to come back to. My question is, how are the programs that are on the current RFA vetted? Was there a call for proposals submitted? And then I have a kind of a secondary question as to why all the former programs were completely removed.
So we utilized our SCAS, where we meet with other state collaboratives. It's our state collaborative group. Mm-hmm. And so learning that's been going on in those groups helped inform the decision on the different professional learning providers that we would select, as well as so what we were learning as well, not just from that organization and the research based information that we're receiving and learning at those trainings, but also what other states are doing. So we just compiled, spent a lot of time researching and compiling what is going on in other places and had the support for. And these are all non-program specific. So these are professional learning providers for big idea learning to keep us focused and not program specific.
Right. So thinking about my second question, I guess, the four frameworks that were available as a choice before, we have many years of state data that shows those were being successful in the schools that were implementing them. I requested that information from CCLD from their yearly report. So I'm just curious as to why those didn't stay on there with the addition of the new programs as we've learned new things.
So schools still have intervention programs will still be selected, by the schools, that's going to be a local decision. So nothing has changed. We're just not giving them a list of specific programs to choose from within this grant, but they will select their intervention program based on the high quality instructional resources and intervention tools. So we won't impact that.
But I think that's a little deceptive when an RFA comes out with all of these listed and you've removed those that were formerly on an RFA. And so I think the way this is titled, I mean, it's professional learning providers. It reads as like this is what KDE is saying is okay. So I don't know. And again, we may need to circle back around. I don't want to
Sure,
going through
and
that.
Whitney,
but
if I can add something as
Sure.
well. So one thing, Lisa, we are required, and Sarah, if you'll get that language for us, and you may have already put that in the chat, but within statute, and this is one of those things that we mentioned, that Dr. Glass mentioned that we had not been doing before, that we felt we had to do moving forward. So the KDE is specifically charged with denoting professional learning providers. And so this is our attempt to have the pre-approved provider list. But we also know that local context is extremely important. And so we want them to be able to, if they want to use something that is off list for the professional learning, for the non-programmatic professional learning that is embedded into the grant process, we want them to have that option. Now, for the selection of the intervention program, for the selection of the comprehensive reading program, that is also a part of the grant, and they are utilizing those, selecting those, and part of the application is their selection and notification of which programs they're using, and it must be aligned to HQIRs, it must be aligned to the elevating evidence, that hexagon tool that we have included there, and that gives them the freedom of choice to make the best decision locally. But we anticipate that many people will likely continue using the models that have been utilized in the past, especially as we have so many reading recovery teachers who work as the specific interventionists within the buildings.
okay, I'll sit with that for a little bit and let you guys continue.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, so changes, within there just as needed to make sure that we have represented each of those funding and time allotments correctly, and just moved over the more updated version of the PL providers into the amended version. Okay, so moving on, you'll see the table of the allowable percentages of base RTA and matching funds. So you can see that just the limitations have been removed, and now we have just, it's very even more flexible. This will also match with what you see in allowable expenses. So anything here before, that said up to 25% of salary of funds could be used towards salary, base, and matching, that is removed. So any portion, any amount of base or matching funds can be used towards salary if a school chooses to do that to provide a reading interventionist.
And Whitney, we do have a question. Bobby has a question.
Hi, Bobby.
Hi, I just have a quick question about the professional learning for all K-3 teachers. What if there is a school that does not include, like kindergarten, or doesn't include third grade?
Yes. Just, it'll be within that. It just can't be beyond. It can't, it can't be fourth grade or fifth grade. It's just the grant is for K-3. So as long as it's within that range of primary.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one other small thing I want to point out here in allowable is with technology, and this just is updated to more accurately reflect what is in the Munis codes, which is what schools utilize to know what they're allowed when they are choosing their spending on their budget. They have codes that have to match up with what's allowable for that particular grant. And so now it just says here, no more than 25% of new hardware cost may be charged to the grant, and only if the purchase is critical to the implementation. So that wording is just, that's not a change per se. It is what it's always been. Just have it in the RFA to make it aligned, because it wasn't that clear before in what the RFA said. It's always been that way though. And then it just addresses that again here in what's in the non-allowable, saying you can't go more than that 25%. Again, not a change, just a clarification within this particular document. You'll see here again, the Teams meeting for the virtual live TA session has just been updated. Formatting, just, little specifics here. A couple of errors were found that we just fixed. Don't impact content, just the layout of how things are done, and those are marked in the beginning in the red. So it's very clear for everybody.
Before you get into the actual application section and changes to that, can I just reiterate again? So that the most significant difference, the primary change to the RFA, was in the funding allocations and the removal of those. And the intent previously was to allow schools to still utilize some of the funding for the salary of the interventionist, but also to have enough funding to be able to provide the professional learning supports and the purchase and selection of high quality instructional resources using the remaining grant funding. But again, because so many people express concern about being able to continue and to sustain the salary of the interventionist, the funding allocations have been removed. So now they are able to use both base and matching funds as they see appropriate for their local context. And so we'll be looking for evidence of the professional learning, for the budget, and the other aspects of what is required in both statute and regulation in terms of what should be in the application. And that's what Whitney will go over next in terms of the scoring. But this is a significant change. So we have eliminated the requirements on those allowable percentages, and that will be left up now to the local schools and districts. So just wanted to make sure that was clear there.
Thank you, Mickey. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
On that chart with the prices, the base RTA funds, matching funds, that 0 to 100, there's no way that you would get anything between, or 0 like to 62,000. Like you're getting 62, you have to match 62. Is that correct?
Yes. Do you think there needs to be a clarification there?
Yeah, I feel like
1% to 100
makes it sound like you could get anything from $1 or $0 to 62,000. So if if it's not a range,
this is not what you're being given. This is how you're choosing to spend the grant funds or the matching funds. So it's the allowable percentages of how you choose to spend it, not what you're being given.
I gotcha. Okay.
But do you all feel that is, I mean, we'll have the technical assistance meeting and we'll be able to clarify much of this, but perhaps that should just be noted as a point of clarification and emphasis, Whitney, for that technical assistance meeting.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the narrative responses evaluation criteria. The only adjustments here. Okay, so for students to be served, this has gone up to 20 points from 10 to 20. And it just reads, this section should explain the identification process for determining which students need intervention, how qualifying students' needs will be met, and by whom how students' needs are monitored, and what indicators will be used to determine if a student needs a new tier of instruction. So previously, it was very similar to this. The only addition is of how qualifying students' needs will be met and by whom. That is the only addition there, just wanting to make sure that that is very clearly explained in the application. And that is also reflected, of course, in the rubric, and we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. And then in part 5, the professional learning and sustainability, this has had a point increase as well. So it is now up to 40 points. It was 25 before. So this section should describe the ongoing professional learning plan and how selected professional learning will impact and sustain overall literacy instruction. So that's the new piece there. How selected professional learning will impact and sustain overall literacy instruction. Improve and sustain the reading skills of primary students reading at low levels, as well as increase and sustain students' motivation to read. And then, of course, that is reflected in the rubric, which we will take a look at now. Oh, and just a point of clarification, of course, we brought in the budget section the 100% matching funds down into that as well, just to make that clear again. So when we get into the rubric, you will see that same change that I just pointed out for part 4. You'll see it reflected in the points section. So the points bumped up a little bit to make that 20 from 5 and 5 to up to 10 and 10. And then you'll see the language added into the criteria here and how they will ensure those students receive intervention instruction and by whom. And then the same things in part 5, like I showed before in the narrative section. Points increased to 40. Same language added here, how selected professional learning will impact and sustain. And then the points adjusted as needed to make that point total. And then the addition of and description of how the plan and selected professional learning will impact and sustain overall literacy instruction. And then, as you saw in the narrative section for part 7, that clarification about the 100% matching shows up again in the rubric right here with 100% matching funds. So as Mickey was pointing out earlier, and really just, making clear as you can see, the bulk of the changes it's around the funding. So it's just around those money pieces and just some clarifications in other places. So that does conclude the overview of the specific amendments to fiscal year 22 RFA. And so now we are ready for any additional feedback that hasn't already been shared. Lisa?
Yeah, so Sarah, thanks for sharing that language from KRS over in the chat. So I'm still unclear. Are you not including any professional learning guidance around the intervention programs?
That is, we can take a look at that. It's absolutely, we've asked that they absolutely be trained, that they must, anyone that's implementing the intervention program needs to be trained in that. You'll see that right up here. So yes, that is a requirement, but we've not provided a specific list that will be a local decision. We have given them tools for selecting their intervention program as a consideration tools to ensure it's high quality.
So the list that you've provided is really more around training that 50% of teachers versus intervention. Is that correct?
You could, if you want to look at it that way, the school, so you only have to train whoever's delivering an intervention program, and that's what's explained here. Well, actually, it's in the PL part, but whoever is administering the intervention program is who would need to have the professional learning around that intervention program. And then you're correct. It's all K-3 staff that work with, as well as the an administrator. If you work with reading students, then yes, that training is required.
So since this is an intervention grant, I just feel like that's a little, maybe could be a little more clear, because when I look at that list of professional learning providers, that's really more around, in my opinion, the teachers that are teaching the comprehensive literacy program. And yes, you do speak to the intervention. I don't know. That's just my feedback as far as that list. Should there be a separate list of suggestions? And I think you've got some other questions, but I just wanted to put that out there as a thought, because
I'm sorry, Lisa.
Because it reads those interventions, those professional learning providers, it reads a little different than an intervention grant. And I'm looking at the language, and it does. I mean, yes, you should as a department, and you shall provide in C a list of professional development providers. I'm not disputing that at all. I'm just maybe suggesting an addition.
And I think what we can do, Whitney, I think in the portions where it does talk about the professional learning that's required for the interventionist, for those staff that are implementing the intervention program, let's bold that language in the RFA and make sure that that is evident. Let's make sure that that's bolded when we get to the application and on the rubric, because Lisa, we agree with you. I mean, the intent is that this is an intervention grant, and so we're balancing making sure they have, again, the funding that's necessary for that position, the professional learning that's necessary for that position, while also coming around knowing that they are not able to reach all the student need to be able to come back around and provide additional support. So I do think that's an effective cue to us, and something that we'll want to make sure that we spotlight in technical assistance, so that people very clearly understand that there are requirements for the interventionist, the implementation of the intervention program. And again, that I do know we state that is an allowable use of funding.
And I think that would be really helpful, especially if you have new people applying for this grant that have not applied for it before.
And hopefully we will.
Yes.
So yes, I agree with you.
Whitney, we have a question from Dr. Cantrell.
Thank you.
Hi, this has been so informative to me. I apologize that I wasn't able to be at the last meeting, so you've helped to bring me up to speed. I appreciate the substitution of the language that was original around the science of reading, and the focus on the cognitive skills and processes around learning to read. And I'm sure you had a very rich and robust conversation last time around that language. And so forgive me if I say anything that's redundant. I'm wondering, though, about the very important pieces around teachers' professional learning, around the social and cultural processes that are also very important in learning to read, in addition to the cognitive processes. Did you have conversation about that last time? And the extensive evidence around the importance of the social and cultural processes, especially as we think about continuing focus on diversity in classrooms and the diverse needs of students who are learning to read.
We did not have that specific conversation last time. I do know that whenever applicants are reviewing the high quality instructional resources section, that will absolutely be addressed. So whenever they utilize some of these tools, those elements are taken into consideration when selecting resources. So the conversation did not happen, but I do feel like we do have it addressed within the RFA.
And Dr. Crenshaw, the only other thing I would add is that, that is not, because that's not explicitly stated in statute and regulation, but we know that that is best practice. So as grant director, Whitney is also able to provide additional support once the applicants have been selected. And so I do think that's something that deserves our attention and certainly is aligned with our implementation guidance around MTSS that we could bring in for the teams to consider, and that very well could be an element of professional learning. And I would also think that when we look at the Kentucky Reading Project and the work that they do, that absolutely is sometimes brought in as part of the professional learning content as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I think if we can be very explicit in the language that is provided in the RFA, I think that's going to emphasize that very important piece to districts and schools as they're thinking about not just intervention instruction, but in reading instruction in general. And so I'll try to continue to have that be part of the conversation as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dawn Sexton has her hand up.
Hi. I kind of want to go off of Lisa's question, and I just want to make sure that I am clearly understanding kind of what she is saying and what you all are saying. So I am a kindergarten teacher in an elementary school, and we are we have reading recovery. And so my question is, like, if we were to apply for the grant and get it, then funds they could be used for the reading recovery teacher, but they could not be used for further training in that. Is that what we're saying?
No, ma'am, not at all.
Okay.
No, not at all. So what I think, so we have to understand there's professional learning in the 4 areas that are listed on the PL provider table. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, and great question. So we have the 4 areas. So building knowledge in understanding the cognitive processes and skills involved in learning how to read.
Okay.
Implementing essential components of reading, implementing the Kentucky academic standards for reading and writing, and supporting the reading and writing connection. So these 4 areas are one kind of umbrella of professional learning that is being required of K-3 instructional staff to support the needs of struggling readers through these grant funds. Okay, that's one piece. Also, the grant requires that there be a comprehensive reading program in place. And so this RFA requires that anyone who is teaching that comprehensive reading program at the school be trained, get professional learning in that comprehensive reading program.
Okay.
Anyone at that school who is providing a reading intervention program, then they should be trained in that reading intervention program as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So whatever, and they have tools here, resources to help select an appropriate reading intervention program.
Okay.
So whatever they choose based on, the guidelines here and recommendations from these resources, then they would be allowed to use grant funds to support that reading intervention program for anyone that's implementing that program.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, that's why there was a bit of a dilemma in terms of thinking about the allocations, because there are multiple required professional learning components that have been in place in this grant, have been in statute and regulation since the beginning. And so the intent was to make sure that schools and districts could utilize the grant funding for that professional learning. And so it was never a matter of us discouraging the interventionist or one-on-one intervention and small group intervention. We know how important that is. The intent was to ensure that there would be some diversification of the funds to meet some of these required professional learning components. And so now, again, with the allocations removed, it will be up to the local school and to their literacy team and those who are potentially the principal and SBDM, whomever is making the decision on how they're going to utilize the funding, whether that goes to the full salary. And if it does, then they will have to determine how they're going to find additional funds, whether that's part of their match or beyond that, to be able to have the professional learning around the intervention program and that comprehensive reading program.
And I think the clarification is here. And so in professional, so after, these are the implementation requirements. So after A and B, which are the comprehensive program that the grant requires and the intervention program, then we go into the professional learning around those two pieces. So, and then as well as the 4 areas. So the professional learning must support implementation of a high quality reading intervention program and or high quality comprehensive reading program. So whomever is delivering those at the school needs to be trained in those. And one of 4 key areas, which we've been discussing and looking at. And we did provide the pre-approved options on the provider's table for those 4 key areas. And then also remember, there is, if someone wanted, if a school wanted to apply, request approval for an off-list PL provider for one of these 4 areas, they could request that. But there wouldn't be no need to request approval for a professional learning to support the comprehensive program they've selected, as long as it meets the high quality standards. And they would not need permission to utilize a PL for an intervention program that they've selected, as long as that intervention program meets those high quality characteristics of a high quality intervention program.
And that's a great point, Whitney. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Lisa put her actual hand up, but I saw that, and you also put your virtual hand up. So Lisa, what are you gonna add?
Yeah, so just thinking about that, and Dawn, as somebody who's already had the grant, and that kind of speaks to my point a little bit about clarity. And so I'm wondering, so the professional learning section C, I mean, we talk about A, the comprehensive, we talk about in B, the intervention, and then in C, we speak to professional learning. But that whole section, in my opinion, really reads to the training of all instructional staff that works with K-3 reading. And then I've read through it just again, if you could show me where in that professional learning C that we actually speak to intervention, because maybe I'm missing it, because I think that's a critical piece.
Well, I think the reason that, and follow up with more questions, but whatever program is selected based on those high quality instructional resources guidelines, the training is going to be specific to that intervention program. So we did not list out anything for that specifically, because that will be program specific and will be according to the program. Yet for the other training, it is spelled out, because there's not a program specific here that like there would be for a comprehensive or for an intervention program. And we also know that there will, the alignment to our Kentucky academic standards is important for both the comprehensive and the intervention programs. And so with this with these 4 areas, we know that our Kentucky academic standards have been included there. And so that's another helpful component for making sure that there's no misalignment or gaps.
And Whitney, I'm wondering if we can take the language under C, and so after where it says see page 2 of linked PDF. So if they click on that link to high quality professional learning, it talks about how it should be aligned to the program that's being implemented. But if we could separate out, so if we could have in bold that sentence there, the professional learning must support, or the first aspect of professional learning must be the supporting the implementation of the high quality reading intervention program and or the high quality comprehensive program, period. Like, let's put a period there. So that's the first phase of professional learning. Start a new paragraph and say, additionally, per, and then Sarah can give us I think it's still section 2, but take that down to a completely new paragraph. And make sure that that's separate. So they see there's required professional learning that's connected to the intervention program and to the comprehensive program. And there's the addition of the PL in one of those 4 areas.
I think that would be very helpful from someone who would be writing, for someone who would perhaps be writing the grant.
Yes.
Districts do have grant writers that maybe aren't completely engaged, but they're writing grants. And I think that would really help with clarity.
And based on the rubric and the application, they do have to specify both. So I think separating that out there does help to improve clarity around that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And we'll come back.
I know you're doing that for yourself. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Sarah did a note in the chat that section 2 was correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sarah.
What other questions do we have? And the reason this is and or is because we recognize that you can't get trained in everything at the same time. Right. So while you would need training in both if you're doing both, but we recognize that you couldn't be doing it yearly both necessarily.
There are so many hours in the day, right?
Right. And I do have one more thought I just want to circle back around to. Just thinking about all of our teachers and students and families who have been so impacted by the recent tornadoes. Mm-hmm. I really do hope that as you release the information, you will let people know in those areas that there is a possibility for extension or whatever. I know we're on a tight timeline. It is just devastating. Mm-hmm. And for example, my husband works in another state agency and they needed a paperwork. And the man was like, the building is split in half. So I'm not going to be able to get someone to send you a letter. And so I just, again, circling back to the beginning of our time together, and I know you guys are being considerate of that, but as much as we can, I think that's so important right now.
And I will say, I know that Dr. Glass would echo that sentiment, and Associate Commissioner Kinney, who again is such help in advising us on RFAs and RFPs. And so we will be responsive to that for sure.
Absolutely.
And it deserves being acknowledged. It really does, I think.
Any hands up that I didn't see, Thomas?
Not virtually.
Thank you all for your feedback.
I have one more question, and then I promise I'll be quiet. I'm just curious, and I've thought of this about all grants that are, administered. What happens if all the money is not awarded? So let's say we get, less applications, and I doubt that's actually going to happen, but what happens in that situation?
So that is an excellent question, and we have never really had that scenario for the Read to Achieve grant. And I think that if that does happen, we would have to circle back to finance and to Office of Legal Services to determine a next step. I know that we could potentially have an additional RFA period, but I think that would hopefully that won't be an issue. Hopefully we'll have all of the applicants that we would want to be able to utilize the funding. But I can't give you a straightforward answer on that at this time, because I think we would all have to circle back and determine our next steps around that.
Okay.
I do expect, though, or I hope, with the removal of the funding allocation requirements, that people will be more likely to once again want to apply.
I think that will be helpful. Thanks, Mickey.
Neil has a question.
Yeah, my wife's a state legislator, and she sent me a note recently saying that she had received a lot of emails on this particular program, and I'm still getting my feet on the ground with it. But the common theme among those were they were from RTA intervention teachers, and they feel this is cutting them off or cutting them back or making them less relevant and possibly less able to work. Is any of that accurate that you can tell from this?
So I will say that that much of that I think was more connected to the salary restriction. So it went from, before they were able to utilize the full funding for the salary. And again, our intent was never to undermine interventionists. We were trying to ensure that they could also have the professional learning funding that would be needed moving forward. So now I do believe, because we have removed the specific percentage allocations, that they will, I would guess that most schools will go back to utilizing at least base funds for the salary of the interventionist specifically. But again, that's still a local decision. That is, local control. But I would just say, based on what we've seen in the past, the majority of grantees would be utilizing funding for salary.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Seems like we may have received all the feedback. Folks
and
want
Whitney,
to share?
just to be sure that everyone's had a chance to have any kind of last comments or questions, will you sort of preview again just next steps, and
Sure.
then they can be thinking, and then we can turn it back over to Sam if she's able.
Absolutely. And I was also going to let me just say this so that we don't forget, but would we be able to go back before we do dismiss and look at the September 30th minutes? I think we may.
Well, Felicia,
okay.
Legal Services has said that we just need a majority vote for the minutes, so we're already good to go with those.
We're good to go. Thank you. While we had everybody, I did not want to miss an opportunity.
I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes, looking at our next steps. So here we are, December 17th, looking at releasing the amended RFA mid to late December, right here, right now. We have the live technical assistance webinar coming up January 3rd from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We do hope lots of folks will join us there so they can have their questions clarified. And then any questions that still remain need to be submitted by January 4th at 4 p.m. And those are by email, and that email address is all throughout this document. Those do not come directly to me. They go to our KDE RFP mailbox. And then we will get the frequently asked questions released on or around January 7th, and those will all be matching the amended RFA. Anyone who does choose to request an off-list professional learning provider for one of those 4 key areas or one or more of those 4 key areas. And that would be in addition to their comprehensive program training or their intervention program training or an assessment training. That would need to be to us by January 12th at 4 p.m. And then the application deadline has been extended to Friday, January 21st. Of course, we've talked about our sensitivity to the tragedy out west and that there may be a need for making some adjustments there for folks. And then we will be bringing in the independent evaluators for the application review and scoring on the week of February 21st. And then this group will reconvene before that April 22nd, on or around April 22nd, when the districts will receive preliminary notice. So after the evaluators, late February and before April 22nd or around about there, we will need to reconvene this group because you all will do the approval of those applicants who the reviewers have evaluated and are recommending for the awards. So that will happen. So we will get back together around March is our anticipated month for that. Could potentially be early April, something like that. And then of course, we expect the funding to be available by July 1. Any questions about that timeline or our next steps? Or has anyone thought, oh, I see Bobby's hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just have a question. Since the deadline for other professional development opportunities is the 12th, but then the actual application deadline is on the 21st, do you have an idea about what the turnaround will be on those being approved since it's only a 9-day difference?
Yeah. I cannot give you anything with certainty, but it will be very quick because obviously if there would be a reason for a plan B for that district that is asking for that, then they would have to have time to finalize their application. So
Okay.
it's real. We want to give everybody time on both ends. Yes, ma'am? Was there another question or did you say thank you, Bobby?
I just said thank you.
Oh, okay. You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Going to give just another moment or so, another minute or two. And then if there aren't any other comments or questions, then we will be able to move on to adjournment. But I do want to just give that moment or two of think time.
Are we ready to move on to adjournment?
Believe so. Thank you, Sam.
All right. Thank you to the committee for attending. We will come back together in the spring for the approval of the awardees. We anticipate this being around March or April. At this time, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I make a motion.
Thank you, Bobby. And do I have a second?
Lisa King, I second the motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion before proceeding to a roll call? Members, as before, please state your name, pause, and then state I vote yes or I vote no. Bobby Barrier, primary program teacher.
Bobby Barrier, I vote yes.
Dawn Sexton, primary program teacher.
Dawn Sexton, I vote yes.
Nancy Hoolan, post-secondary faculty.
we can move on. She's not
Susan
here.
Cantrell, post-secondary faculty.
Susan Cantrell, I vote yes. Did you hear me? Okay.
Sorry, we had an announcement over the intercom. I was trying to pause for a second. Penny Howe is not with us today. Sam Sams, elementary school principal, I vote yes. Jessica Sparrow, library media specialist.
Jessica Sparrow, I vote yes.
Dreama Gentry is not present today, state at large member. Neil Chethick, state at large member.
Neil Chethick, I vote yes.
Lisa King, state at large member.
Lisa King, I vote yes.
And Tammy Sherry, post-secondary faculty.
Tammy Sherry, I vote yes.
Thank you all so much. The meeting is adjourned. We hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful holiday season as well.
Yes, thank you so much.